He brought us beer, so I put it in the fridge to keep it cold.
Oh, thank you.
So. Best guess, clear,
definitely
far and away. Thanks everyone for joining us. Today we're talking to one of my favorite people. Curvel is, like I said, an old friend of mine. He's an artist, a photographer, a thought leader, a documentarian, videographer, an editor, an author, a designer. So Curvel, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Hey, thanks a lot. Thank you for having me.
So I'm going to dive right into it, Curvel. Your experience I met you as an online content creator, but also was introduced to you as a documentarian. You're someone who's really heavy in the digital space these days as far as creating content with cool and innovative brands. How would you describe yourself and your own experience, and maybe give an example of a project where people can kind of see some of your previous work?
Well, man, sometimes it's kind of hard for me to even talk about my own work. But I would say right now I'm a lot focused on a specific area within an industry that I consider to be untapped. It's the men's grooming industry. It's an industry that is a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's providing jobs for a lot of individuals that are now becoming millionaires from cutting hair. It used to be once thought of like an industry where it was mainly hairstylists, colorists, that type of work. And now you're finding people who were on that side of the industry now moving over into like men's grooming, cutting hair, design, speaking, education, all of that stuff. So that's pretty where I'm focused on right now. A lot of the work I'm doing right now is being done for a company called Squire. They're a technology company within the grooming space. Their strength is really powering the barbers, powering the barbershops. They're really going after the high-end barbershops, the people that are really like looking to position themselves as a really good tech company, grooming company. So these guys are really good at what they do. I create a lot of content for them. Branded content. We're traveling the world right now. We're shooting some of the most influential barbers in the world. We're telling their stories. We're having them tell their stories because they're in a position where these guys, when you look at the industry on a whole, unless you are probably the celebrity, you don't get the coverage that you need to keep propelling your career forward unless you're attached to a high-profile person and in the crossfire of their career, you're ending up being highlighted. In this case, Squire is really taking the time to recognize these individuals and put them in a position where they can really benefit from the technology, the press, the identification, and most of all, telling their stories and their skill sets.
So when you're telling these barber stories, like what's the format that each one takes? Is it kind of like each one follows a certain format, or is it kind of like flow as the story flows, or what's your task from Squire in terms of like telling each barber's story?
I think there is a format, and the format, going back to what I was just saying, the format is their story. Mm-hmm. We go into their city, and they're pretty much giving us a guide of themselves within their city, within their industry, and talking about the places they frequent, highlighting the places that if you come to their city that you should check out these places, but also just talking a lot about the industry in itself and how they've seen the industry grown, how it's propelled, some of the things they see coming, what they would like to see better. A lot of that comes from the way we're covering it, or the way I would say I'm covering it, is really about the journey of that person within their city and inside of the industry. That is pretty much what we would look at, the story.
So for a lot of these folks that you're highlighting, and I've seen some of the work you've been putting out for Squire, and it's really interesting, and you take this personal bit and you tell their story, maybe their training, their inspirations to get into the grooming industry. But for folks who maybe haven't been highlighted in this realm before, do you see any resistance or inertia, or what do you as a storyteller have to kind of do to encourage them to open up? Is that an issue you've run into?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are some high-profile barbers that don't recognize the importance of press. I think a lot of people are really stuck on, I have a great social media following. And as an example, I think it was a few weeks ago, we all saw something that I've been saying forever. If any of these major social media platforms shut down, you can go from being successful to non-success right away. It was a few weeks ago when Instagram went down for an entire day, and people were just like, what do I do? And I think that one of the things I've been talking to these guys about is allowing themselves to have another voice through another platform where they're able to be searched online, where if you were to Google their names throughout search engines, that they can appear. You're not really appearing on a search engine for your Instagram handle. You can, but it's probably not going to be the first thing that pops up on Google search or even inside of Facebook or any search engine in particular. So a lot of the resistance I've gotten so far is trying to encourage these individuals to understand the power of them telling their story through other outlets other than social media.
And what's it been like on the other side? Do you get a lot of, are they always happy with what happens and what comes from your work, or what's the general reaction?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few challenges that comes with that. I was in London and I shot a guy named Champs, who works at Puma, or who's working with every football player in London. He's a really successful barber, highly successful, sought after. And literally, my WhatsApp went off the day we published the article, and he sent me a message. He's like, Curve, I cried. The stories were so intimate, and it's cool when you're interviewing we're here, but then when you see the content and the way people receive it, I remember telling him, I was like, yo, man, we're just gonna have a conversation. We're just gonna hang out, and through the journey of hanging out, we're just gonna create something magical. And we did that, and I really felt like that was probably one of the best pieces I put together, because there was just that level of comfortability that him and I had so much in common. We love streetwear, we love cultures, and we love just hanging out and just being where he was in London. He's based in Soho in London. I live near Soho. I live in the Lower East Side. It's just all these cultural aspects of it just clicked, and we were able to just put this project together. It was really a beautiful project. And then as far as the downside of it, I think what I encounter a lot is that I come out of the edit and I'm excited about this project because I'm everyone needs to see this. It needs to be known. And we do our part of putting it out, promoting it, sending it out through the emails, and then we're having a hard time for this specific barber or the individual to share the content. And for me, I look at that and I'm like, wow, man, that means two things to me. You don't care, or probably you felt I didn't hit the positive sides of where you wanted me to hit. So that becomes a little bit personal. So I would say that's probably one of the two things that I encounter.
We've run into the same issue before on content we've made for our brands, and you do have that question. It's did I do something wrong? Did I personally offend you, or is the content not up to a standard you were expecting? And it's sometimes you can ask them straight up, and you feel like you're not getting the real answer, or at least they're they're deflecting.
And I have. I remember being in Long Beach probably 2 months ago, and I was this one barber, I was like, yo, what's up, man? We've gotten probably some of the best response from this content we created with you. You're not sharing it. I'm and it's not that you have more juice than we do. It's just that it's important for us to keep growing that community. And in order to grow the community, we need everyone that's participating in the community to share the content. And he was like, Curve, I'm sorry, I did. And he starts showing me that he shared it. But I'm like, where are the shares? He's like, okay, I'm gonna do it right now. So sometimes you really have to do what you just said. ask them, talk to them about it, and then it's a little bit of guilt and kind of like, please do it. You know what I mean? Like, because it's the only way that specific community can grow. It's the only way. And one of my focus is really trying to allow this community to spread the word of the culture of barbering, to understand that that is a real job right now. It is no longer looked at as the job of your grandfather. A lot of people, I've heard stories of like guys who were incarcerated, who came home and worked 10 years and were able to put their kids through Ivy League school from barbering. And now, you know, to go a step further, at Squire right now, they're called GetSquire.com. We're doing, I just finished a series that you guys would probably love, and it's called Making Bank. And Making Bank is a series of 6 stories that's being released about barbers that are earning 6 figures and better, like up to $1 million. And they're literally like breaking down the categories of how they're going about earning that money. So I'm really looking forward to that coming out.
I'm really curious about, and this is a conversation we've had multiple times. I can think we probably had this conversation 2-3 years ago, the first time. It's about getting brands to support content in their niche. And I think a few years ago, it was tough. It was something where you and I were both wrestling with it. It's like, how do you get brands to get on board with the niche content to support it, whether it's to sponsor it, whether it's to create it natively. And we saw the value. And I remember you saying, well, it's how you build authenticity in that niche, right? You have to support it, you have to give, and you'll get. You know, what you're doing with Squire is you have a company that's really trying to go in and own this niche and add value, and they're investing in that content. So do you see more brands doing that and more bigger brands doing that, or do you think that's still kind of relegated to the niche markets right now?
I think it's a reverse. I think smaller companies are now trying to think on a bigger level. And so it's almost like a flip side. So if you look at like a brand like Gucci right now, Gucci has literally tapped into the streetwear culture, right? They've gone from like being so sophisticated to now they are still sophisticated, but they are attaching more of a streetwear element to their brand. And they've been doing it for years. And now they're probably, I think they got voted last year the #1 brand in the world. And it's true. When you look at what they do, it was either Gucci or Louis Vuitton. But like when you look at a brand like Vuitton, like you could have never seen a 23-year-old or 18-year-old walking down the street that was a male with like a Louis Vuitton pouch bag, which is branded by Vuitton and Supreme. So like that's a big this is one of the biggest fashion houses in the world taking a step back and entering a niche market and bringing it to a broader audience, right? And then you see now the small brands hopping into the big brands market to be like, yo, we now have the niche market of cool, the audience. We own that world. We know it's harder for you to enter that market than us to enter your market because we see people at a high level wearing our clothing or our product and supporting it. So I think, to answer your question, I think there's an opportunity for big brands to hone in and do stuff that's more organic. And then there's always going to be the market for a niche brand to just stay working with a niche culture. Because I think it's easier, to be honest with you, for things that are niche to grow than when a brand hits a high level. It's harder for them to come back down and speak to an audience that they're trying to gravitate to. Mm-hmm.
Aside from Squire, are there other niche brands you think that have really told stories in a great way? Like, have you studied other brands doing a similar type of content that you're impressed by?
Yeah, I mean, I look at music festivals. One of the things I'm doing right now is if I'm working on an idea or a concept, I'm never looking at the industry that I'm working in. So like when I look at project work that I'm doing for Squire, I'm not looking at what's happening within the men's grooming space. I may be looking at what Tesla's doing. I may be looking at what, Vice has done in the past. I look at what's happening within the wellness space, but not specifically barbering, but what probably, some of the bigger hair product brands are doing, what's MAC doing, what are some of these wellness brands doing. So I like what Afropunk has done a lot for a music festival that started in Brooklyn to highlight, Black up and coming musicians, that are punkers, and the message that they've been able to allow that industry to have. To me, that's very niche. I mean, like, when you go to an Afropunk music festival, you see the people that they want to target. You don't see a broad spectrum of people that's like, oh, why are you here? You understand why they're here. And that, to me, is a brand that's really locked in on what they're doing as a brand. And I think everyone is always going to talk about what Supreme is doing. I think they're really good at it. There are some brands like, up and coming brands. Like, there's a brand that I'm probably wearing right now they call Noah, and they're really good at like playing into like the social issues of what's going on around, a lot of it even around New York City mainly. So they're really niche, and they're really like locking in on their brand message. I like that.
I know that a lot of the work you've done over the years has been community driven. The fighting community was a community I know that you did a lot of work in a documentary, and now the men's grooming community. What is another community that you've kind of had your eye on that you think is a little underserved, and you're thinking, well, maybe that's the next one that I want to do some storytelling in?
To answer that question, yeah, I'm really excited about prison culture right now. I think what's happening within the prison industry, aside from prison reform, I think it's the type of skill set that has been locked away in the prison walls. I think it is one of the markets that companies are now starting to tap into to try and understand how can they service them, but not only how can they service them, how can they work with them to bring their ideas to life. And there's a huge bubble inside of prison culture that is about tech. And a lot of companies don't know that because there's such a stain on your name when you've been incarcerated. But think about it. These people have more time than anyone else. And a lot of them are criminals. They come from the streets. They have figured out how to beat the police and the system for years. Who's better at telling you ways that tech can grow and other things that they would like to see that probably most of the people that's part of their communities would want? So I was just in a meeting yesterday, and one of the top tier marketing companies or creative agencies, the top, probably one of the top, has now bringing on prisoners into their agency to give them advice on what ideas they can create within the tech space. That was so shocking to me because I've been talking about that for a long time. And I think that market is an area where it's underperforming because no one wants to give it an opportunity. And it's one of my first choices right now, the prison culture. Yeah. And then we're looking at an industry right now that I've been paying a lot of attention to. I think a lot of people are paying a lot of attention to is the weed industry. I think that industry is nowhere close to what it will be in 10 years. I think it has a lot of room to do so much more than just the medical aspect of it. It has a lot of room for brand and message. It has a lot of room for people to do health speaking engagements. It has a lot of room for like psychologists to work around, therapy. There's so many areas within that space that a lot of people who are looking at the weed industry, they're just looking at it from the usage of the cannabis point of view. But there's so many more elements around that industry that it's so far from being touched.
Mm-hmm. For creators like you out there, for artists that want to do this type of work, say you've identified one of these areas you want to tell stories in, or you're open, like how do you go about getting involved? Like how do you go to the brands, or do you go to an agency, or do you just start doing it and hope someone notices? Like what's been your path in kind of developing this career?
I think a lot of it is exactly what we're doing right now. I think something that is dying, but is still probably the most important form of creative and commerce, it's networking. Meeting people and having open conversations with no intention of it going anywhere. And allowing those conversations to create a connection and a relationship that eventually puts you in a position where that person looks to you for some sort of like expertise, or they look to you as someone that can be a consultant on a project that they look to you as someone to point them in a direction in an area that they're not familiar with, but you have a lot of knowledge in. And I think Tao and I have had these conversations for a while now. I mean, our relationship has just been growing, and we meet and we have conversations that goes nowhere because it's not supposed to go anywhere. It's just supposed to be a conversation that we have and we both enjoy it. And I think that's what's happened. A lot of people are so focused on like, when I meet someone, I want to get a job from them right now. They're losing sight of like, you have to build a relationship with that person that comes from a form of trust. They need to know that the things you're saying or the things you're talking about is an area where you have spent a lot of time focusing on. And I think because of social media right now, a lot of individual thinks that they can just hit you in the DM and be like, hey, I'm really good at this. And you're thinking that you don't have a track record for that person to be able to be like, all right, I've seen some of the stuff this guy has done or this girl has done. She's been able to do this work on her own. I've always said that as an individual, I can conceptually develop an idea, I can create, and I can execute. And I think, right now, because of this industry we're in, you have to be able to do these things because companies are now shrinking in the sense of like, there's a creative director, but the creative director has to be the photographer. The creative director has to be the conceptual developer. And this no longer where, there's 40 people working on a creative team. It's not that way anymore. It's a small team of 5 people doing these extensive projects.
To be a specialist means you can create a package. It's not like, I only do editing. I only necessarily do sound. When you work with brands and you're a specialist, it's like, well, they want you to create a package for that niche or something like that, but you have to be a jack of all trades in many ways.
And that's really something I think we talked about this a while back, and I don't know how you feel about this, but like I felt like earlier on in my career, or when I was trying to have a career, that being jack of all trades would hurt me. Mm-hmm. Someone once told me, you have to become really good at one thing, let everyone know that you're really good at that, and then you try to jump into other areas of that community. And I did at some point have to do that. I had to step back and be like, you know what? Let me just focus on this. And within the focus of that, I needed to accomplish something within that area that people were able to like attach me to. Mm-hmm. And from there, I was able to like lend my expertise in that area, but also be like, hey, by the way, just so you know, I also have been working on this on the side. And that has led me to be flexible as a creative.
But I think what brands and companies see now is like specializing that in one thing. That definition gets broader, right? When you had, company, blue chip company XYZ might have had 40 people in their creative department 20 years ago because they were only producing for print and TV, right? But within that, they saw print as one thing, they saw TV as one thing, but now companies are worried about print, TV, social media, their own blog presence, influencer acquisition, influencer marketing, paid acquisition, all this the SEO, and now there just isn't enough bandwidth to see, the videography, the editing, the copywriting as separate things within each of those. So they're bucketing them as individual things, and they're bucketing kind of the full package of those together. Whereas, social media to create great content, you have to ideate, you have to film it, you have to edit it, you have to do the copy for it, you have to optimize it. But there's so much going on, and you have to create content across so many different platforms. They're only seeing it as that one thing.
Which is true, yeah.
So to specialize even within that, it's almost beside the point, because they're going to come to you and they're going to say, okay, you're the person we want for social acquisition or something like that.
Right.
So they do see it as one thing. They do see that as super specialized, even if within that you can dig like 4 levels deeper.
Yeah, I mean, I'm feeling that working with Squire and then working with other brands. When at Squire, I am the creative director, but if we're putting out a line of merch, I am the one designing it, or I'm having an input in the design. We're launching a new website, and I had to look at what the website is going to look like and feel like, and my opinion is asked on that. And I think one of the things I really enjoy a lot working with Squire as a company, it's that the CEO and his partner, it feels like I'm working with my friends in a very professional setting. So it's like, Curve, what do you think? And we really discuss it. Whereas a lot of other companies, the CEO just makes a decision without even looking at, why we have these people around us that are part of this culture. Why don't we get a sense of like what their opinions are? We may not use it, but it's important that you understand that. And I meet with these guys, and I just have creative meetings with them that goes nowhere. And again, it goes back to what we were saying. It doesn't have to go anywhere. It's just us brainstorming ideations, ideas, concept, developing things. I was in a meeting with the CEO I was in a meeting with him 2 days ago, and we were talking 2021. What would we like to do? And I'll leave a meeting with him, and then he'll call me in 5 minutes and be like, hey man, I had this idea. And for me, that's so exciting when you're working with someone that is as passionate, you feel that passion that they have for their job and the creative that goes into it. And more of that, there's a respect. Because a lot of people, you guys as content creators, right? You're working with a brand, and the brand literally thinks that you just go create the content today, give it to them tomorrow. They don't understand the amount of work that goes into creating content. It's like people need to start treating content like it's creating a TV show, because it takes that long.
These days, it's almost the same thing. The quality is expected.
It is. It really is.
Yeah.
There's graphics, there's coloring, there's sound, there's editing. Sometimes you have to go reshoot things because it didn't come off right. I was in a conversation today about, Instagram TV is now just starting to take off. Brands are really now starting to use the platform. But the thing is that you cannot. I just ran into that problem at a trade show in IBS New York. I wanted to shoot content for the blog, for Instagram, but then I wanted to shoot for Instagram TV also. And I have one camera person with me, right? And I have to direct this video. And I'm realizing, wow, we have to change the format. So if I wanted to shoot us now, I have to set up one camera that's shooting for IGTV, but I need 2 cameras. So I'm like, okay, I can't do that on the fly. I have to now pick which format I want to shoot for. And it's really interesting because there's so much that has to go into it. Again, the graphics, the coloring, the sound. You know, they want it to look as sharp as they think it looks on television, because all the screens that we have on our smartphones and our iPads,
high def now.
it's high def. You have to give that to the brand. That's what they want.
I had someone from a brand, not a brand that we work with directly, but a different industry, asked me 2 days ago, and they saw a video that Barbend put out, and they're like, "How long did it take your video editor to finish this video?" And it was a video that had motion graphics, coloring, sound, on camera talent. Like there was, and I had trouble explaining to them. They just didn't believe me. I was like, well, 6 people touched this creative project, right? You had someone filming it. You had someone at least one person on camera, editing in post, doing the sound, color correcting, motion graphics, static graphics, someone doing the copy for those graphics, someone doing the copy for the video description. Like, so many hands touching it, and they couldn't grasp that it wasn't just one person sitting at a computer and just doing this whole thing by themselves. And it doesn't work like that in a vacuum anymore.
It doesn't. I think one of the things that brands need to realize, that if you have one person doing all this work for you, you're sacrificing the quality of the work. And the quality of the work is such a strong representation of how much you care about your brand. You know, I am someone that's avid about talking on the quality of what I put out. And I've put out bad work. I have. I've looked back at work that I've put out, and I'm like, dude, this is horrible. But when I look back at the horrible work, it was based on me having to do all of it by myself. Whereas if I had working with a team that was an amazing graphic designer, or a colorist or a sound guy, then I'm able to have them look at the work and be like, okay, you can give me the best of graphics. You can give me really good coloring. I have an amazing sound guy that I'm working with. And then the beauty of this package that comes together is what a brand is paying for.
And it should look seamless. There should be like a lightness or an effortlessness about it. The viewer can't be caught up in, I wonder how many people were involved in the making of this.
They're not supposed to.
Right, so it's almost like you have to like hide the lines. You have to hide the work in a way. You can't exhibit the full team behind it. And it's a little bittersweet sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, how do you guys feel when you're working with smaller brands? If you've gone to work with a small brand, and like, what are their expectations?
I mean, I would say everyone has the highest expectations possible, where they want what they see, right? And these days you go on YouTube, like, I think our videos are pretty high quality at this point. They've grown a lot in the last year, but they want, like it looks on TV. No matter who they are, no matter what their budget is, that's what they expect. So that's always the challenge.
I know. I had a brand that I was away. I was getting out of here, and a brand calls me, and they've been trying to work with me for a while, and they're within the tech space, and they're like, hey, we have this thing happening. We have a panel discussion, blah, 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 but we want to create really good content like what you've been doing for our brand. Can you do it for $2,000? But we need like 2 camera people. We need 3 30-minute packages.
30 hours of B-roll.
and I was like, and I just told the guy, I was like, listen, I'm sorry, I cannot help you. At that point, what's happened to me in the past is what will happen to me in the future. I will have to end up putting my own money into your company because I do not want to put out work that is of bad quality. It's a representation of my brand. It's a representation of the years that I've worked to put myself in a position for him to call me. And for other people to see the work that I want to put out, for me to go and do work for $2,000. I mean, literally, these days, if you want to get your friend that is really good as a camera operator, he's gonna be like, hey guys, it's gonna be Curve. It's $800 for me to help you.
Yeah.
So then that's not editing.
Yeah. And that's the friend price.
That's the friend price. That's not paying for his commute. That's not him telling you, hey, by the way, you want really good quality? I'm gonna need Zeiss lenses. I'm gonna need this, like that, and all of a sudden these are add-ons, right? And so your friend rate is still, by the time you're done with them, you just paid him $1,500 to shoot because you added on all the package prices and stuff that you included into there. So I've been spending a lot of time talking to a lot of content producers, people that are looking at new spaces that they want to work within. Is there a way to scale back on the cost of content? And everyone says no. Content is now TV. So forget about the box. The box is now content. It doesn't matter if you want to create it for Instagram, it's content, it's TV. It doesn't, and please, if you're creating it for YouTube, it's TV for real.
Right.
Yes, please believe that. So that's my opinion on that.
Well, just to, before we go, Curvel, where can people follow your work? Where can they, keep up to date with what you're doing and the projects you're working on?
I like to say follow me on Instagram. And I think there's very few Curvels in the world. So if you were to just spell Curvel on Instagram, you'll find me. There's a link on my bio that brings you to my website. It also tells you the companies that I'm working with, who I've worked for. And, I'm working on a few really cool projects right now. I'm working with the brand Squire. And please, I hate saying when I speak, but yeah. I'm working on a prison project for Squire right now that's really cool. It's about the life of prison barbers and the re-entry into society, allowing them to work. The federal government is now restricting barbers who've been incarcerated to allow them to have a license. So that's a challenge that they're coming home to, and we're really trying to highlight that project and show them ways that they can re-enter the market and allow themselves to have a career. Alongside of that, I'm traveling a lot. I just released a photo book about Chinatown. It's called Untold. That project is pretty cool. I'm selling prints on my website. So if you go to my website, you can check that out. And there's a few other projects that I'm just not at liberty to talk about them right now, but I'm always working. And I'd love to do some work at barbering one day. Yes.
Sounds good to me. Yeah.
I know some people you should talk to about that.
Yeah.
Our budget's $1,500. We need TV quality. That's the only thing. Yeah.
That's really amazing. Hey, I'll just help out. Yeah, that was great.
Curvel, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for having me. I feel honored. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.